Hey, it's Mailbag Wednesday, and the White Sox made it two in a row, beating the Arizona Diamondbacks on Tuesday afternoon. What can we expect from some of the lesser known White Sox prospects, and what kind of batting order would produce the most success? Also, Elvis Andrus is getting used to second base, and there is a new White Sox documentary about the 1990 season.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong die-hard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. We are around that 30-day mark until opening day. Sox taking on the Houston Astros in this month, March 30th. I really appreciate you passing along this podcast to other White Sox fans in your life. Thanks for all of the mailbag questions. Going to get to those on this episode. Talking a little spring training as well. Our Chicago White Sox are now 2-2 in this early spring training. Sox beat the Diamondbacks on Tuesday 4-1. Just a couple of news and notes here. If you didn't hear about it, check out the latest Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan. I joined Paul Sullivan to talk all things White Sox, a little bit of the 2022, a little off season, and what we can look forward to here in 2023. Again, that's Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan. Also, just a heads up, there will not be a new episode this coming Friday, March 3rd. I will be in Arizona checking out spring training in Glendale, but I'll be back with the whole recap on Monday. So again, no new episode this Friday, March 3rd. Mailbag questions, really appreciate all the comments, all the questions. However you get them to me, I do appreciate it. Alex and Brett checked in on some prospects, and that's kind of a hot topic right now. We're seeing so many players, usually with those higher numbers or no name on the back of their jerseys, in Arizona getting some action, and there's always a couple names that might emerge, whether it's a bullpen arm or maybe it's a utility player, maybe somebody we'll see later this season. So Alex and Brett asked about Cristian Mena and Yoelqui Cespedes, and those names have been talked about quite a bit, and I will be checking in with Lindsey Crosby. And that's a plan. Locked On MLB Prospects. He is the go-to. He's going to join the podcast in the near future. And I think he's got a lot of great insight on some of the lesser-known White Sox prospects. I also checked in with Daniel Victor. And if you are on Twitter, he is an outstanding follow. He's a writer for White Sox Daily, outstanding resource when it comes to all things White Sox minor leaguers. And I asked him about Mena and Cespedes, and this is some really detailed answers. Daniel Victor sees a lot of minor league baseball, and I really trust his opinion. So this is what Daniel said about right-hand pitcher Cristian Mena. And Victor even mentioned in his description, talked a little bit about Norge Vera as well. So Victor said Mena was one of the very youngest guys in all of Double-A when he moved up to join Birmingham. I would guess that he goes back to Winston-Salem to begin this year. He only had 40 innings with Winston, and he didn't dominate. He's got a great hook. I think it's his best pitch. And in my live looks, that was his out pitch. I didn't see the premium arm strength. He was mostly 91 to 93 miles per hour in the starts I watched. Although I heard he could get fives, I even heard somebody say 97, but not quite sure that I buy that. One of his teammates, who I respect a lot, told me that he thought Mena was better than Norge Vera. I didn't see that way because I saw Vera get to 97 with the free and easy effort you'd put into a game of catch in the backyard. However, Vera had a dead arm before he left Kannapolis, and his velocity was not good in Winston or Birmingham. It was like there were two Norge Veras. That being said, I imagine Mena having a big league opportunity in 2025 at the earliest. He will only be 22 then, unless he just goes great guns and gets the world on fire for the next 9 months. Then maybe 2024. I just don't see the kind of talent in him that you expect in a pitcher that debuts at 20 or 21. He's talented, but not Kershaw, Beckett, Bumgarner level talented, at least not yet. And then Yoelqui Cespedes, this is what Daniel Victor had to say about Cespedes. Yoelqui looks like he has a fourth outfielder profile. He can play excellent defense and has an absolute gun of an arm. But the bat to ball is holding him back. 30% strikeout rate in Double-A at an age appropriate for the level. Hopefully he destroys Triple-A Charlotte because the hitting environment is prime there. If he doesn't get a shot this year, my guess is he ends up an organizational afterthought like Yolbert Sanchez and Mike Rodolfo. The White Sox have all but appeared to say internally, all right, who's next about Yolbert, and Miker is currently a free agent. Hopefully, Adolfo finds a good landing spot because he deserves a shot. Maybe Yoelqui ends up a shuttle guy for injuries. He definitely flashes some tools. Appreciate the questions, Alex and Brett. Again, Daniel Victor, a great follow. Such a wonderful source of information when it comes to minor league guys. And I will be checking in with Lindsey Crosby, host of Locked On MLB Prospects, in the near future. Nice comment from Tyler. Tyler said, I've liked how the at-bats of the projected starters have looked so far. Long at-bats, good takes, and good contact. Like to see some improvement with runners in scoring position. But unfortunately, that's nothing new. Correct, Tyler. That is right on with that. Talked about it in some recent episodes here on Lockdown. And if you were with me for the 2022 season, it was a rough season in so many different ways. But runners in scoring position, the Sox just could not get that done. How many times they had bases loaded with nobody out and they could not get a run in. So thank you for the comment, Tyler. I agree. Jose Castro, Mike Tosar saying all the right things and have been throughout the off season. Love that Pedro Grifol is focused on situational hitting. I mean, if you're going to look at something in spring training, and again, depending on who you talk to, they might say really nothing truly matters. Don't go too far underneath the surface. But situational hitting is something that I definitely like to keep my eyes on. Producing with runners in scoring position is a problem early on for the Sox right now, but there does seem to be a plan in place. It's being articulated through quotes, through articles, something I just don't remember hearing from Frank Menachino or La Russa. It's practicing how you take pitches. That has also been a focus, which I think is fascinating. And the way they've got some of these pitching machines, they could dial in, all different kind of goofy stuff. And you're training your eye to track that kind of stuff, those secondary pitches. And especially for a guy like Colas and even Gonzalez, they're so new to major league pitching. Definitely Oscar Colas, like that is such a benefit. Trying to generate more walks, less strikeouts. guys being more selective because they have a plan. I have seen that so far. We're only 4 games in, but when you look at some of the walks to strikeout numbers in the last 2 games, it is promising. Thank you, Tyler, so much for that comment. Several listeners weighing in on batting order and specifically, maybe where Andrew Vaughn might hit in the lineup. He's been hitting 5th, 6th right now in early spring. Would you like to see him higher up? He's been in the bottom half so far. Less pressure, perhaps. Maybe that's where they want him come opening day and at the beginning parts of the season, because there is a ton of pressure on him. He is not new to Major League hitting, but he is new to that first base position, stepping in out of the shadow again of Jose Abreu. So maybe keeping him in the bottom half, less pressure, balance the lineup a little bit. You've got some power now in the bottom half of your lineup in that 5 or 6 hole. You want your best hitters, of course, at the top. And Stoney thinks that Vaughn could hit maybe around 300 this year. He wouldn't be surprised by that. We do hope the power numbers are there. He's got to be a 20-plus home run hitter. So maybe Andrew Vaughn forces his way up there eventually. But right now, I think what they're doing with Robert up at the top, Jimenez, that lightning and thunder, Robert Jimenez, I think you're going to see that. Obviously, Tim Anderson's going to be at your top. Benintendi should be in that 2 spot. And then right now, Vaughn's been hitting behind Moncada. I can see maybe that flipping depending on how Vaughn has, how his spring goes and how Moncada's spring goes. But having some power down at the bottom of the half, that could be where Andrew Vaughn hangs out and feasts on some pitching, perhaps. Saw this article in The Athletic. A lot of people wondering about fantasy baseball, and there is a Locked On MLB Fantasy Baseball podcast now, but saw this in The Athletic about which players from each MLB team are likeliest to outperform their fantasy draft ranking. I thought this was interesting, and the 2 players highlighted were Yasmani Grandal and Yoan Moncada, and this was the write-up from James Fegan. Both these gentlemen have rankings that reflect how they're coming off dreadful seasons ravaged by persistent injuries. Both are in spring camp touting their best health in years and don't need much more than regression to the mean to exceed expectations. At a catching position where no one can hit, Grandal has never posted a below average weighted runs plus before last year. Moncada is 27, should be entering his prime, and has entered the year super focused by the chance to play for Cuba in the World Baseball Classic. It shouldn't take much more for them to improve. James Fegan from The Athletic. So I guess keep your eyes on Grandal and Moncada if you're trying to figure out those fantasy baseball leagues. White Sox got their second win of the Cactus League on Tuesday, and Oscar Colas continues to hit. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on anything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So White Sox took care of business of the Arizona Diamondbacks on Tuesday. Sox took care of them 4-1, 2 games in a row now for the White Sox. Jonathan Stever on the hill for the Sox to start the game. He only went 1 inning, which was a theme for all the pitchers. Gave up 3 hits, 1 earned run. That was the only run of the game for the Diamondbacks. After Stever, you had Graveman, then Diekman, Ruiz, Shaw, Ramsey, Perez, Shoney, and Olson. White Sox used 9 pitchers on Tuesday. Each pitched exactly 1 inning. And again, Stever was the only pitcher to give up a run. Sox pitching had 8 strikeouts and only 1 walk, which was great to see. Offense was clicking as well. Not as much thunder as the previous game, but it got enough to get the job done. Sox had 4 runs, 11 hits, 4 extra base hits. Billy Hamilton had a double and stole a base and scored on a safety squeeze in the game. Good to see that from Hamilton. Can he force his way onto the White Sox roster? Definitely need that speed, especially late in the game. Man, that could be a difference maker. Oscar Colas, boy, I feel like every day there's something new we're reading about Colas, or he's doing something, or he came into this spring training with so much excitement, and I do want to talk to Lindsey Crosby about Colas and Montgomery, as well as some of the other lesser known. But Oscar Colas got his 4th hit of the spring on Tuesday. He also has played now in all 4 games. Not seeing the power yet, but there's no doubt that will come. Right now, I love that he's swinging the bat. He's finding his pitches. He's doing whatever he can do with those pitches. That power is going to come eventually. So he had 4 hits in his first 8 at-bats. Beginning spring training. Luis Robert had 2nd double of the spring and an RBI. Zavala, 2-run home run from Sebi Zavala on Tuesday. Eloy Jimenez played right field. He was 2 for 2 and with another walk, which is a great sign. And Hanser Alberto played second base, had 2 hits. Could this be a guy that maybe forces his way on the team and might replace a guy like Lurie Garcia? Again, the Sox signed Alberto back in early January, a well-traveled infielder that spent 2022 with the Dodgers. He's got a free-swinging approach. Most scouts say that maybe Tosar and Castro will be able to help with. After 7 at-bats this spring, Yoan Moncada still looking for his first hit of Cactus League play. White Sox had 4 walks in the game and only 5 strikeouts, but with runners in scoring position, they were 1 for 10. That is a number that absolutely can't happen often. Thank goodness it is just a spring. How about some quotes before Tuesday's game? Daryl Van Scoven had him for the Chicago Tribune. Grifol was talking about Garrett Crochet and his bullpen session. This is what Grifol had to say. Looked really strong, looked good, pounding the strike zone. He's comfortable. His numbers are good, assuming he means velocity. I'm really excited where he is right now in his quest back from Tommy John surgery. And then Pedro Grifol on Colson Montgomery. Grifol was impressed with Montgomery taking 4 straight pitches, a half-inch or inch off the strike zone versus Mike Clevenger in live batting practice on Tuesday. Grifol said Montgomery looks calm. It looks like the game comes to him at the right pace. So those quotes, those conversations by Grifol talking about Montgomery's takes relates to the conversation from previous episode about Mike Tosar working with Colas and Gonzalez, on taking pitches to practice discipline. The more pitches you see, the more dangerous you become. Elvis Andrus talks about the transition to second base, and there is a new White Sox documentary coming out. More on that in a moment. So Elvis Andrus in his 15th year in Major League Baseball, making a position change for really the first time. And Andrus talked about playing second. Even in Cactus League action, Andrus felt a bit different playing 4 innings at second base during the 10-1 White Sox victory over the Mariners the other day. This is what Andrus had to say. It was completely weird. The weirdest game I've played in a while. Said Andrus. Even between innings, I was like, what am I doing here? But I'll get used to it for sure. Continuing to play shortstop was his preference, according to Scott Merkin, but playing second for the White Sox with Anderson healthy was not a crazy idea. For sure, it was in my brain, Andrus said. I need a few more games at second, but I feel good. I've been working really hard with Eddie Rodriguez, our infield coach. I'm not 100% comfortable at second yet, but it was a pretty good first game. I wish I could have had a few ground balls. I was calling for them, but I feel good for the first game. With nobody on, it's pretty simple, Andrew said. You see the ball, react to it, anticipate the guy hitting wise. We know what he's going to throw, and that helps you to anticipate before moving after they hit the ball. With nobody on, I'm very comfortable. It's pretty much with a man on first when I want the ground ball because I want to make the play so I can make it easy for me. Besides that, last year, I played a lot of second base through the shift, so it's nothing crazy. Again, I really, the fact that he got into camp right away, they got that signing done, and he's got this whole month plus. Now, I mean, days are winding down, but he's got a ton of time, and they could work on that chemistry. Andrus and Anderson, we know it. We know Andrus is going to be your starting second baseman, barring an injury or something crazy. So they could work on that chemistry. Andrus can feel more comfortable. It's a great thing overall. Wanted to touch on something that's going to happen Thursday night, and you might have heard about this. I talked about it on my weekly White Sox podcast, Good Guys Talk Back. The folks that have been doing these Last Comiskey documentary snippets and segments over the last few years, archival footage, and it's just been absolutely amazing. Well, Matt Flesch, the writer, the producer, he is going to join me on Thursday's episode to discuss this new 3-part documentary on 1990, really the end of an era for old Comiskey Park, and such an amazing team, a scrappy team, an energetic team that challenged the juggernaut Oakland Athletics during that year, all the way to almost down to the wire. They've got a bunch of stuff out on their YouTube channel. You can find them at Last Comiskey 1990. They've got several little mini episodes, I guess, about that year, and some running threads about the ballpark, Nancy Faust, and even they go through a couple other decades, and then they highlight certain players. Well, this new documentary is just absolutely full of interviews. Jack McDowell, Scott Fletcher, Ozzie Guillen, Ron Kittle, Greg Hibbert, Bobby Thigpen, on, talking about Jeff Torborg and how instrumental he was with that ball club. So if you're not familiar with what the Last Comiskey folks have done, you can find them on Twitter at Last Comiskey, and just search in YouTube Last Comiskey 1990 and pull up just some amazing footage. It really takes you back, and this is great for no matter how old you are. But if you remember that 1990 year, it was going to be the last year, of course, of Comiskey Park, and all of a sudden, this team got hot. They started to play well. They were predicted to finish dead last. Took it personal. And wait till you watch this documentary. The first episode is going to drop Thursday night, March 2nd at 8 p.m. And then the following 2 Thursdays at the same time, they will drop part 2 and then part 3. So Matt Flesch is going to join me on Thursday's episode of Locked On White Sox to kind of break everything down. Really exciting for that conversation. Folks, thank you so very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcast. We're on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can start getting those questions and comments in for next week's mailbag already, lockedonsox@gmail.com. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I'll be talking to Matt Flesch, writer, producer, director of the Last Comiskey documentary on Thursday. And again, just a reminder, no new episode on Friday, March 3rd. I will be in Arizona at spring training. Back on Monday, though, to recap all the spring training happenings as our White Sox inch closer to opening day. Appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski. Until next time, go Sox.